Only this, to let the indifferent and lukewarm party on the one hand know that the Lord is keeping up a handful to witness for him against their past and present rotten courses of defection, notwithstanding their cutting off the hair and putting out the eyes of these 3 ministers before mentioned, and carrying them in their printed acts and letters through the nations as trophies of their victory over them, as men whose former lives and doctrine had been contrary to the former rules and principles of the church, nourishing and encouraging schism and division and defection, and their former testimonies made up in many things of several peremptory, gross mistakes, uncharitable and injurious reflections, tending rather to kindle contentions than remove divisions, all which are plainly insinuated in their act, called the Proceedings of the Assembly anent Mr. Linning and others, thereby laboring through them to reach a blow to the cause of God, and to all the faithful witnesses and witnessings of the poor remnant with whom they were once embarked. And the malignant party may also know that we look upon them as the murderers of our dear brethren, whose blood, as it is precious in God's sight, so no human power can indemnify. For though it be God's glory to pardon, yet man's duty and glory is to administer justice impartially. We are not changed, from our former principles and intentions, but our cause is the same, whatever those who have fallen off from us may plead for. And finally, we desire all persons, of whatsoever new party they be, minister or other, that would appear more refined than the rest, and pretending to act separately from our enemies and antagonists, whilst yet really incorporate with them, and carrying on their designs more effectually, though more smoothly and instrumental, to break and divide us more than any, as if purposely sent forth by the rest for that effect. Not to mistake us, as if what we have said in order to the rest were not applicable to them, but on the contrary, we look upon their course as accompanied with many aggravations that others are not capable of, and so, as more loathsome to God, ought to be the more detestable to us. And as for neutralists, who account it wisdom to condemn all and pretend to side with none, we refer them to the last article of the Solemn League and Covenant, without forgetting the rest, namely, that we shall assist and defend all that enter into this league and covenant in the maintaining and pursuing thereof, and shall not suffer ourselves directly nor indirectly be whatsoever combination, persuasion, or terror to be divided or withdrawn from this blessed union and conjunction, whether to make defection to the contrary part, or to give ourselves to a detestable indifferency and neutrality in this cause. According to which article, men's reality and integrity in the covenant will be manifest and demonstrable, as well as their omissions as by their commissions, as well by their not doing as their doing of evil. As well by their not doing good as by their doing of evil. He that is not with us is against us, and he that gathereth not with us scattereth. And however our complaints be this day tossed with tempests and not comforted, yet we hope he hath thoughts of peace and purpose of mercy towards us. We do not mourn as those without hope, but we will bear the indignation of the Lord, because we have sinned against him, until he plead our cause and execute judgment for us. He hath lifted up our enemies, that their fall may be the greater, and that he may cast them down into desolation forever. He will make his cause to triumph at last over all opposition, and the enemy's foot to slide in due time, and so put a new song of praise in the mouths of all the faithful friends and followers of the Lamb. Therefore we appoint and ordain that incontinently ye, our emissaries, pass upon the 10th day of August, 1692, years unto the market cross of San Juan, and there, by open proclamation, make intimation of this our declaration, leaving copies of the same affixed upon the foresaid market cross and other patent places of the kingdom necessary. Given upon the 10th day of August, 1692 years. Let King Jesus reign, and let all his enemies be scattered. The protestation and apologetic declaration and admonitory vindication of a poor, wasted, misrepresented remnant of the suffering, anti-popish, anti-prelatic, anti-Erastian, anti-sectarian, true Presbyterian Church of Christ in Scotland, united together in a general correspondence, etc. These kingdoms have been in pain to bring forth in uniformity, but alas, they have brought forth wind. We have been in expectation of uniformity in judgment and practice, But how monstrous a deformity and dissension in both! These that profess themselves healers of our breaches, they make them wider, while they build a wall and strive to uphold it and daub it with untempered mortar. Unity is beautiful, and accursed may he be that doth not both love it and study it. But unity must be consecrated to verity, and both to God. Truth must be the uniting principle, else we cannot be truly one. But interests and prejudices are clouds to eclipse that light of divine truth that otherwise would shine in the world. These put out the eye of the mind and darken the light of truth. Where is now the product of all that expense of witnessing, wrestling, blood, and suffering of our worthy ancestors and dear brethren in depositating and transmitting to us such an excellent testimony when brought to the very brinks of Jordan? Have we not sinfully and shamefully buried all? Have we not chosen ourselves captains to return us back unto Egypt again? And are we not in the highway to it, and at one blow cut the very neck of our noble constitution, covenanted rights, and charters of our pure Mother Church, for an Erastian and clipped platform of mock presbytery, shapen out by and accepted at the first instant from the hands of the civil powers, and these for the most her old inveterate enemies, underminers and opposers, dealing with her as with an illegitimate bastard who cannot dispose of or transmit their inheritance to posterity, but must fall in the king's hands, or as broken heirs who enter to their grandfathers to evite the debt of her many vows, engagements, protestations, testimonies, declarations, etc., that we and the whole land are inevitably engaged into, especially these between the years 1638 and 1649, with the faithful contendings of the protesting party in the year 1651 till anon 1660, reducing her to an estate of minority and delivering her to be the pedagogue, tutory, and disposal of her enemies, betrayers, and opposers. What corrupting and everting the very constitution of the Supreme Courts of Christ in their members, convocating, sitting, voicing, and proceedings, all accommodated and managed according to the king and court's letters, acts, appointments, and recommendation. What burying and vilipending our solemn and sacred covenants, acknowledgement of sins, and engagement to duties, and in lieu of them introducing illimited oaths of allegiance and assurance, not only exclusive but contradictory of the former, and making them the grand qualification of all members of their church, state, and army. What abominable conjunction and confederacies with the Lord's inveterate enemies, the very old props, pillars, and limbs of Antichrist! And how encouraged with sinful and barbarous levies, cess, hearth, poll money, and other supplies! What a vast toleration of all errors, heresies, and blasphemies, promoted, pleaded for, connived at, and protected! What encouraging of bloody and perjured prelates with their underlings, yea, and trusting with the cure and care of souls! Some of them created presbyters, some indulged, while pretended presbyters are made, or rather have made themselves court curates, parasites, hirelings, and changelings. What God-provoking, soul-ruining, land-cheating fasts and days of thanksgiving for the success, designs, and interests of the Lord's old and stated enemies! What dreadful polluting and profaning of the Lord's Supper! What horrid pardoning and advancing of bloody murders and murderers of the Lord's people and others, whereby the Lord is provoked and the land defiled with blood! Alas, what horrid iniquities are not now perpetrated, encouraged, enacted, and complied with! But our design here is neither to insist nor expatiate on the unparalleled God-provoking, soul-destroying, land-sinking apostasies and defections of the pretended representatives either of church or state, having in our declaration at San Juan on 1692, August 10th, by virtue not only of our general call as Christians, but by reason of that sacred and solemn tie of the public national covenant and of the solemn leaguing covenant, and desirous to be found faithful in this day of temptation, and to exonerate our consciences in his sight, and to avoid a cession to the guiltiness in which most have involved themselves, fairly read marches in setting up our ancient boundaries and covenanted landmarks betwixt us, and both of them hold now by many weighty reasons. why we could own neither of them, but in our places and stations behoved to disown and testify against them, and all the acts, determinations, and conjunctions flowing from them, and with all their courts and judicatories, while so constitute and circumstantia, while declaration we were homologate, which declaration we were homologate, though hitherto flouted at with disdain and exploded with indignation, and the owners and adherers thereunto reproached, persecuted, and hated, not only by open enemies, but by the bulk of the so-called Presbyterian ministers and professors, while they themselves neither will nor dare so much as mutter or offer one mite of a testimony for the present precious word of the Lord's patience. And the Covenanted Reformation of Scotland in doctrine, worship, discipline, and government, and the National Covenant of Scotland, and the Solemn League Covenant of Scotland, England, and Ireland, and the work of uniformity in religion, and against all or any of the injuries, insolent indignities, violations, and breaches done unto and made upon the same. But out of zeal to their mercenary bastard loyalty, and to their own short and cursed quiet, have manifestly and deliberately broken and buried their solemn oaths and allegiances to Christ, sold his crown, sword, and scepter, and royal prerogatives, with the liberties of this church, and have confederate, bonded, associate, and embodied themselves with the Lord's stated enemies and opposers, their sins, interest, and courses. Yea, have metamorphosed themselves not unto a shape, but unto a condition below an ass, whereby the work of reformation, piety, and godliness have gotten a sore blow, the wicked and ungodly their hopes heightened, and made to say their day is coming. So we have seen it, and the godly discouraged, their hands weakened, and their hearts saddened, and made almost to say, our hope is cut off, our glory is departed. Ruin and desolation apparently ineluctably drawn on the land, if not prevented, by giving and taking timious warning. And yet after all these things are done, gadding about so much to change their way to seek love, teaching the wicked ones their ways, they wipe their mouth and say, we are innocent, and that notwithstanding of all that is come upon us. We have not forgotten the Lord, nor dealt falsely in his covenant. We cannot bear these who discover our iniquity, and make known our sins unto us. And if there be any who design to keep their integrity, and adhere to their former covenanted principles, bear testimony against the land's apostasies, backslidings, and defections, these are the burdens of many, and are for signs and wonders, who are spoken and acted against as schismatics, traitors, Gibbs, Moronians, and what not. Nevertheless, though we be men compassed about with many infirmities, and for our sakes also wrath is upon the land, yet considering that some, by reason of the acts of your pretended parliaments, or upon what other pretenses or pretexts we know not, have to the grief of our hearts most sinfully and shamefully paid, and designs to pay the poll money in our name unjustly and impiously imposed, exacted and complied with by all ranks in the land, whereby many of our names are inserted in the public collectors' books as tacit payers, compliers, and connivers with such juggling, cheating, and God-provoking abominations, manifestly importing and owning any of their imposers as our lawgivers, who have broken, burned, and buried the covenant, overturned the Reformation, and destroyed the people of the Lord, a sacrilegious robbing of God in our means and estates, and giving it to his enemies, which we gave away to him in our sacred covenants, contrary to the zeal we owe to our covenanted husband and honor of his house, by not only securing and strengthening his enemies and opposers in their professions, courses, and designs, but inviting them and prostituting our means, estates, and consciences to them.